Uh, Excellent. So myself and David will be doing recitation 1 on AWS. Um, this recitation is predominantly here to help you guys understand this tool that we're going to need to use to facilitate the training and evaluation of the networks that you guys will be creating, predominantly for the part 2s of the homeworks. So we'll have a recitation on this, and then we'll go into how to use AWS and what it is and all that stuff. So next slide, please. Amazon Web Services is one of a number of different cloud services that are available. These provide compute resources to the individual corporations at various different levels. So we're predominantly interested in virtual machines in this case. And AWS is one of the leaders in this particular domain. Next slide. So, yeah, AWS offers, at least the services that we're interested in, there's two prominently. There's the Elastic Compute 2, which is a fancy name for their virtual machine sort of service, if you will, and then their S3 storage solution, which we'll be using to share some of the data sets that will be made available to you. Next slide. Do you want to take this one, Dave?
Yeah, so on AWS and specifically EC2, there's like a number of different services you can get. And the compute is specialized for different like fields that you would need, like subsets. And then the one that you'll be using most of the time is either a T2 or a P2. These are generally in the free tier, so if you want to develop something without paying from your credits, you would use a T2. And then the P2 is more for machine learning, so when you're doing your training, you would want to use one of these. And so you have like this class of the machine, and then you also have the sizes. So out of any of these, you can match it with any of the machine sizes. So you could have a T2 16x large or a P2 nano. So these are like the way that the machine is specialized, and then this is the size of the machine. So this is another way to look at it. You have like a T2 nano, a P2 16x large. So this would be specialized for machine learning, and this would be for web services. And you can see the different the specs for all of these machines.
So these are different configurations of hardware that you can allocate from AWS to do different things. You'll want to use larger configurations for your full-size deployment where you test and train on large data sets, and you'll want to use smaller ones for testing and development.
Okay, and then the reason that we use these machines, number one is pretty much GPU access. So if you have a GPU on your computer that you would want to use instead of AWS, you don't really have to use AWS. But one thing that can be helpful is installing of various packages that might be you might not want on your local computer. And then there's a bunch of other like more difficult things that are more applicable for higher level. The cloud computing that we do in this class is pretty limited to just GPU access, so it's not too difficult. But there are a bunch of other use cases that would be necessary.
Yeah, so the predominant reason we're using this tool is we don't expect everyone in this class to own an NVIDIA GPU, and you have to have a pretty modern one to run the newer versions of PyTorch in particular. We also don't expect everyone here to configure their computer for that GPU. So, we don't expect everyone to be running a Linux environment and things like that. And then the final reason I would say is software, right? 'Cause, there's a number of different CUDA toolkits and stuff like that you need to set up and get ready, and we can avoid a lot of that by using AWS.
Cool. Yeah, so that's basically what it is. It's for GPU access for your training in the homework part 2s. And so now if you haven't started to make an AWS account, just go ahead and let's start doing that. Can I get a show of hands who has made an account or not? Okay, so everyone needs to make one? Cool. Yeah, so go to aws.amazon.com. All right, I guess we'll move on now.
Hey,
If you're still
David.
having problems with setting up, you could come to office hours or ask on Piazza.
Hey, David, we've got a question on Piazza.
Okay.
The question is, should we sign up for the basic plan?
Yeah, the basic plan.
Okay.
All right, so everyone that has your account set up, let's start by making a basic machine. So go to Services, and then select EC2. Services. Yeah. Okay, so if you're here, when you're on AWS, you can just go to like account settings, and then it'll get you here. And then here's services. So services, and then EC2. Okay, and then after that, click on your running instances. So that's so if you go to services and then EC2, you can click on your running instances. So I have one right now, but you guys shouldn't have any. And then switch your region to US West Oregon. So I'll be here. Just drop down, select. US West Oregon. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so here is where you'll see your instances. So here is where you launch an instance, and then this is the actual AWS instance. So here's where you'll do all your operations with it. Like you right click and this comes up, and then when you click on it, when it's active, it'll show your DNS and it'll show some other information. And that's how you'll connect to it. So, but we'll get to that. So now let's launch an instance. So click on launch instance. And then this is the AMI that we'll use. So when you go onto your instance, when you SSH, you'll have access to all the packages that are in whatever AMI that you choose. So the deep learning AMI that we have, it has access to all of these frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch. And so the version of PyTorch that you'll want to use is on the deep learning AMI.
So let's be clear, an AMI is a lot like a prefab system image that you can that has software pre-installed, right?
Yeah.
Does the version of Ubuntu matter? Like 14 or 20?
I don't believe so. I've always used the 20, but I think either should be fine. Okay. Cool. So select the deep learning Ubuntu one. And then for now, select the T2 Micro. And here is where you can see all of the different type of machines. So you have the T2s of all sizes. So yeah, the one that I used for my training in this course was P2X large. So you can see here, this says GPU instance. Above here, it's just general purpose. So that's the difference between like a T2 micro, which is just general purpose, no GPU, and then a P2X large, it has the GPU. Okay. So then for now, let's do a T2 micro, and then you configure the instance details. You don't really need to do anything on this one. So here is where you have your SSD for the instance. Generally, 75 is the default. There's a couple times when you might want a larger instance, like if you have a big data set. Like in homework 2, part 2, we have a lot of data. So you might want to create a larger instance, like maybe 150 gigs. But it's also possible to modify the storage on an instance that you already have. So if you don't have the volume that you want from the beginning, it's still possible to change it afterwards. So after the add storage, there's tags. You won't really need to do anything with this. And then security group, you also won't really need to do anything. And then review and launch. Here is just telling you everything about it, and then you can launch. All right, and the last thing is to connect with it, you need a key pair. So if you choose an existing key pair, I have a bunch already that I have. You basically just have to have one. You don't really need multiple. And then you just save it. And then every time you'll connect to any instance, you'll be able to choose the existing one that you have and then select that one.
Why does it give this warning about your instance configuration? It's not eligible for free usage tier if it's a 32 micro that's free.
Oh, you'll get charged like 10 cents a month or something just for the volume on their like servers. So after today, you can terminate the instance and it'll get rid of the cost.
So we have a Piazza question. It's which version of the AWI, the deep learning AMI, I'm sorry, should we use?
I always use 20. I think that should work. Okay. So this is how you choose an existing key pair. If you create a new one, you just name it and then download it. And then once you download it, this is how you'll connect to an instance. So once you have your key pair, you have to run this command from terminal in order to give this correct security access to your key.
So this is actually a public-private key in the form of a file that's used by SSH to log in, and all you're really doing is changing the permissions on that file so that it can be used by SSH.
Yeah. So if I was to create a new one, speed test, you would download it, and then
David, is there a difference between the Linux and Ubuntu AMI?
I've always used the Ubuntu one.
All right.
So if I have my key in downloads, test recitation, I would run chmod 400, and that should do it. And then once you want to connect to the instance, so now you can see it's launching. So you can go view, and then here is the instance. And then when you want to connect to it, this is the address of the instance. And then the way that you SSH, you'll do Ubuntu @ and then you paste this.
You need to add sudo. Yes.
Yo, Raphael, do you know? Okay, I'm not sure why this chmod isn't working. Have you guys tried doing the chmod command on your key?
Have you tried sudoing your chmod?
Yeah,
Yeah. Just
and then I just downloaded this one.
Did you change the mode of your keys? Did you try sudoing this command?
Bruh. Shit.
It's your own password.
Yeah. Okay.
Permission
Oh.
files.
That's strange. Is it chmod 600?
You can just adding a plus before the 4.
Plus?
It should be 4.
Should be 4.
Yeah, it should be 4, but adding a plus before the 4.
That's strange.
Can you ls this? I think it's working right now, right? Sudo change mode thing. Yeah, but when you do it sudo, oh, what happened?
Wait, what are you trying to do?
Copy this repository.
And then ls.
Yeah, with options. Dash A. Dash AL. AL? Yeah, dash AL. How do you get the? It's going to be the. Why do you exist? Yeah.
Wait, what are you trying to see? I mean,
Like see the permission
Uh,
for those files. Maybe you can go to that directory and see.
yeah,
Can you get another terminal?
yeah. I mean, I have another key that I can use. I just don't know why it's not working.
Maybe it's expired. When did you create that?
No, like I just created this one. Like I have another one I can use if I need, but
Okay. Yeah, I guess just.
And if the chmod that's not working, but
Why can't you see the permissions in this document?
can you copy that?
yeah.
And then go to that directory.
Yeah, cd. Can you cd that?
CD, yeah.
So just do Control A. And then
Okay, so basically it's your whole.
What?
Okay, so there you have.
Yeah, it's weird. Maybe if I get out of bash.
Okay, hold on. Okay, there is the problem. Why can't you go there?
I don't know, that's weird. Oh, so if I moved it out, I couldn't do it.
Like,
downloads. Capital D.
okay, try now.
It should work.
So chmod 400.
Yeah, it's working. Okay.
Download. Shit. Yeah, I think it's working. It's just slow. Wait, so was everyone able to connect to their account? Were you guys able to do the chmod and then SSH? Did you guys try SSHing? Can I get like a...
For people on Windows using PyTorch, do you have any idea what
Okay. Wait, so can I get a show of hands of who was able to connect to their machine? Nobody? Wait, so where is the like issue that people are running into? Did you guys try to connect? Have you guys tried to connect to the instance? Like, what step are you at right now? All right, was everyone able to like either get an instance or like they understand how to connect to the instance? If you're trying to connect to your instance and it was hanging, like when you had the SSH command and it would just like freeze, try switching your region to Ohio. And then once you're in Ohio, you have to create a new instance and you'll have to create a new key pair. All right, so I'm going to take the last half an hour of class to show some examples of like how you would use the instance and then just some things that you should take away. If your setup is still not working, you could come to office hours today, or you could post on Piazza some of your errors. But for now, I'm just going to show some examples of how you'd use it. And then also, you can just refer back to these slides throughout the semester if you ever need to do something with your instance, like this command, or this is how you change an instance type. So since you have to pay more money for a P2X large than for a T2 micro, you can create a T2 micro and like put all the data that you'll need on it and develop your code. And then once it's time to start actually training, you can change the instance type to a P2X large, and then you don't spend as much money, and then you'll still have all of the data on your instance while you're training. So while an instance is stopped, so this is how you stop an instance. Right click on it here and then stop. Then when the instance is stopped, you'll right click and you'll go to instance settings and then change the type. And then for now, you can just change it to a T2 nano, but you could change it to a P2X large for your training. So when it stopped, you would go to instance settings. And then right now, since it's still stopping, as you can see here, you go to settings, and then you'll be able to select change instance type. So,
David, were you able to get around the credit card number issue when creating an account? Or is that something people still have to do?
yeah, you have to enter a credit card.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for Piazza.
Because if you run out of credits, you have to pay. And that's something that AWS like requires of you. All right, so here's like a small example of like the difference between when you're on AWS and when you're not. So I created a P2X large previously, and I have the code on it. So this is just like a small example. So here, you'll be able to import Torch once you SSH into your instance. And then the way that you find out if you have a GPU or not is you do torch.cuda.isAvailable. And then here I just made some matrices. And then if you have GPU access, the way that you move something onto the GPU is you do .cuda. So when you're training, you're going to want to move your model to CUDA. You're going to move your data, like each batch of data, you'll also want to move to CUDA. And then you'll want to move your criterion. The reason for that is that when you do an operation on the GPU, everything that it interacts with also has to be on the GPU. So if you have your model on the GPU, you need to put the data that you passed into the model. It also needs to be on the GPU. So with this, I'm putting these matrices on the GPU. So these lines will work. But then if I try to add the CPU and GPU together, it'll break. So if I actually want it to run on a GPU, you have to comment out this line. And then here with the try and accept, you can see that the error will be here when you're comparing a CPU and GPU. So here's my instance. So I'll connect to it. And this is what it looks like to connect to an instance. So like this is where you go after the SSH. These are a bunch of virtual environments that you have access to. So the one that you'll want to use, you see here how it says source activate. Oh no. Here. So if you're using Python 3, which you should, you'll do source activate PyTorch P36. So if you don't do this, you won't have access to PyTorch libraries. So here, if I show you where I am, this is what comes by default on your instance. So if I run the code here, so it prints true because I compared these, and it didn't break because the CPU and GPU, you actually never put anything on the GPU because my laptop doesn't have a GPU. But if I'm here and I run the example, yeah, so it broke on the line break everything as expected because it expected a regular float tensor, but it got a CUDA. So since this was on the CPU and this was on the GPU, it expected this to also be on the CPU. So if I comment out this line, it says using GPU, and then you can see that it went into the except because there was an error here. And then if you want to take something off of the GPU, the way that you do it is .cpu. .detach is if your tensor has gradients, you'll want to do .detach, and then you can do .cpu. And then another thing you might want to do is you can also do .numpy to change it to numpy. All right, so that's kind of like how you use CUDA on your instance. Oh yeah, and if you have your instance set up right now, you'll probably want to terminate it. The way that you do that is right-click, and then instance state and terminate. So when something is running, you're getting the full charge for it. So on a P2X large, that's like $1 an hour. When you have something stopped, you're only getting charged for the volumes. So under here, you have elastic block storage. If you go to the volumes, this is the 75 gigabytes that are connected to your instance. So Amazon charges you, even if you're not running a machine, they charge you for this. It's only like a few cents a month, so it's no problem to have an instance stopped. But if you want to save like every bit of money, it's better to terminate your instances once you don't need any access to them. So once you terminate is when you'll no longer have access to any of them. When it's stopped, you can keep accessing the instance whenever you want.
And I think it's important to note that we will be issuing 3 $50 vouchers across the semester. So we can't issue those until the drop add date is come and gone, unfortunately, but we'll be getting those out as soon as we can, so you guys shouldn't have to actually pay anything.
Yeah, I mean, like you should be able to do everything on a P2X large, which is $1 an hour. So you'll have $150 for the semester. So in almost all cases, that should be enough time for your training.
And I believe that if there's a reason you go over, we have some flexibility.
1 cent for every gigabyte.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh,
it's
it is.
not cheap because I paid $55 last month.
Oh, okay, yeah, I guess tell them, yeah.
Yeah, just tell them.
Or what do you want to tell them?
You want to tell them?
Yeah, you could go ahead.
Okay, so guys, though like Jacob said that it's 1 cent for every month, but it's actually 1 cent for every gigabytes for every month. So every instance have at least 75 gigabits, so it's still huge amount of money. So you don't want to really stop that for a very long time. Just keep that in mind.
Wait, are you sure? I don't think I had that.
Because I have 55 hours, like
Really?
last month, because I didn't shut down the thing completely. Yeah.
Okay. That's weird. I don't think I ever had that. Okay. Yeah, so terminate your instance whenever possible.
Because for homework 4, you have to like a few hundred gigabytes.
Okay. All right, so here's how you redeem AWS credits. So once we send you the credits, this is how you're going to redeem them. So I'm just going to, this is how you turn off the instance. You just stop it. So you go to your account and then My Billing Dashboard. And then on here you can see all of the costs you have. Like this is how much money they foresee charging me. And then there's other things like you can check your bills, your budgets. But here you go to credits, and then we'll send you promo codes. You just enter it here, then you'll enter the characters, and then you redeem. So here's some credits that I have left over. It's pretty simple to redeem credits. Just remember you go to your account, My Billing Dashboard, and then credits. All right, and then here's some just like words of wisdom. I don't really expect you guys to remember all this right now. Like, I didn't really learn the AWS stuff until I had to use it for homework 1, part 2. So as we actually have to use the instances, you can go to office hours to check with TAs about it. You can post on Piazza, and you can refer back to the slides to just check on like what you need. These links are how you can adjust your volume without shutting off the instance. So the way that you do it is you have these instances, and then here's the volumes connected with them. So you can modify the volume, and then you can change the size here. So if I'm 75 now, I could change it to like 80. It takes a little while to enact, so you'll want to give it a little while for it to take effect. But you don't have to like terminate your instance and create a new one, because then you'd have to upload your data again to the instance, which is pretty annoying. Because some of the data that we use is pretty big. So when you're SCPing it to your instance, it could take like 10 minutes or something. So it's useful to be able to modify your volume without terminating the instance. Does anyone have any questions?
Is there any way to view all of your instances across all regions? Because it seems like it only shows me my Oregon one or my Ohio one.
Yeah, I think it's just at one, like you can only look at one at a time. Yeah, so you can refer back to here if you forget how to modify the volume. If you guys like using Jupyter notebooks, you can connect your AWS to a Jupyter notebook. This is just a way that you can do it. You like refer back to here if that ever comes up. Cody, do you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to talk about those of you who may decide or may think of using your local hardware. So every semester there's always at least a couple students who go, I have a GPU of my own, I want to use it instead of doing this AWS stuff. That is possible. I did it last semester, but I will warn you, especially those of you who are gamers, like that's usually why people own a GPU, that you don't want to do this on Windows. You really don't. You can log into AWS and access that through Windows, no problem. But if you have your own GPU and you're trying to do work locally, you're going to want to, at a minimum, set up a dual boot for Ubuntu, and I would recommend doing that on its own hard drive. But that's going to involve extra steps. The TAs aren't going to support it, and you should have a lot of system memory if you're going to do that in a really modern GPU. I would advise using AWS for this class for the most part. So I went through a lot of difficulty trying to get this to work on my own. It was interesting. It was a learning experience, but there's a reason we have it done this way. It's going to be a lot easier for you guys. So don't think that you're going to save any time using your own hardware. I trust me, you're not going to. Okay.
Yeah. So some of the keys to take away from this this happens every year. People will leave their instances on overnight, like they'll sleep and forget that they left it on, and they'll burn like 10 credits. They'll burn $10 of credit overnight. So make sure every time you go to your instances, make sure that it's stopped. Even if you aren't SSH'd into it, it's still running, and Amazon is still charging you for that time. And then whenever you're done with the homework, make sure to terminate it so you don't get charged for the volume. Another one is we recommend you use PyTorch. Some people try to use Keras or TensorFlow, but the support in this course is mainly for PyTorch, and it'll make your life a lot easier if you use PyTorch.
Just to be clear, you are allowed to use whatever framework you want, but the TAs won't be able to support you if it's not PyTorch. Yep.
Yeah, and you'll need permission to launch a GPU instance, so we'll provide some links on how to do that. But basically, you need to ask Amazon for access to a GPU. It's a pretty simple process. You just request access to a GPU from them, and you say why you need it, and then they'll provide it. And then another thing is that you should only launch an instance when it's time to train. So there's going to be a lot of code writing that you have to do that you won't actually need a GPU for. You only need the GPU when you're training your model. So when you're developing, you don't want to be spending $1 an hour while you're writing code. So that's when you will do the T2 micro and switch to a P2X large when you finish developing. And then I think you guys saw me like using Vim on the when I SSH into the instance. If you want to use a local IDE instead of Vim, because I don't use Vim very often, what you can do is like you could edit here locally, and then whenever you want to put it on your instance, you could just keep an SEP. You have to do the -I, which is the permissions. So you do this, and then you do path to file, and then you do Ubuntu at EC2, ... and then you do :home Ubuntu, and then that's how you would SCP a file onto your instance. You'll also want to use the SCP command if you're transferring data. So if you download data from our website and then you want to put on the instance, you'll use this SCP command. And then there's probably going to be commands that you repeat a lot, so you might just want to save like an SCP and an SSH, and then you can replace the, you remember it had the EC2 here? So this is how you changed what instance you're going to. So you could just keep a list of the commands and change this when you want. All right, I think that's all I have. Cody, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it looks like some people are having some problems on Piazza, so we may have to follow up on that later. But in general, I would say just be, like I said, wary of your time. You'll want to do your development with a smaller data set so you don't burn too much time. You want to sort of be at a point where you're ready to train on the full data set once or twice, lengthy, at some length so that you don't burn through too much credits. Recommend when you use AWS, recommend you use PyTorch. That's about it.
Rafael, is there anything you want to ask?
Yeah, so AWS is a complicated infrastructure, and sometimes it just won't work without giving you a good reason. So if that happened to you today and you just can't, you think you did all the instructions and it still doesn't work, just try again this afternoon, following the instruction on the slides, and maybe it's just gonna solve itself. And if not, we have office hours.
Yeah. All right, so thanks everybody, that's all we have.
And of course, feel free to post on Piazza if you have any problems.
Yeah.